The wealth-building habits taught in books form a blueprint so consistent across time, culture, and authorship that it becomes impossible to ignore the patterns. Whether the advice comes from early 20th century classics like The Richest Man in Babylon, modern behavioral masterpieces like The Psychology of Money, entrepreneurial manifestos like Rich Dad, Poor Dad, investing Bibles like The Intelligent Investor, or practical guides like The Millionaire Next Door and I Will Teach You to Be Rich, the same principles resurface again and again. These books do not just teach strategies, they encode habits. Habits that shift identity, rewire financial behavior, and reshape long-term destiny. Habits that compound quietly in the background while others chase quick wins. Habits that, when practiced consistently, turn ordinary individuals into wealth builders over time. The most successful readers do not simply collect ideas. They turn these ideas into daily discipline, recognizing that wealth is less about extraordinary income and more about the consistent application of ordinary principles executed with uncommon commitment. These books teach that wealth is built long before it is seen, in the invisible realm of decisions, routines, and thought patterns that eventually manifest as financial freedom. One of the most universal habits taught across financial literature is paying yourself first, the principle that a portion of every dollar earned must be saved or invested before any spending occurs. This habit reframes wealth building from an afterthought into a priority. It teaches the reader that the path to financial independence is paved not with sudden windfalls, but with disciplined, automated accumulation. Books emphasize that this habit, once formed, works regardless of income level because it forces alignment between spending and long-term goals. Over time, paying yourself first becomes more than a tactic. It becomes a declaration of self-respect, a commitment to one's future, rather than impulsive consumption. Another defining habit is tracking money with awareness, a practice foundational to books like Your Money or Your Life and echoed across nearly every personal finance classic. Tracking is not about restriction. It is about clarity. It reveals unconscious spending patterns, emotional triggers, and hidden leaks. It reconnects the individual with the true value of their income and exposes the difference between spending that brings fulfillment and spending that merely numbs. Readers learn that wealth begins with awareness, and that awareness begins with measurement. What gets measured improves. What goes unmeasured deteriorates silently. A third habit embedded in wealth literature is living below your means, not as an act of deprivation, but as a strategy for power. Books like The Millionaire Next Door show again and again that most wealthy individuals are not flashy consumers, but disciplined, value-driven spenders. They direct money toward assets, not appearances. They prioritize long-term freedom over short-term status. Living below your means creates the gap from which wealth is born. The financial surplus that fuels investing, entrepreneurship, and opportunity. It is a habit rooted in identity. Wealthy people act as stewards, not showpieces. The next major habit is automated investing, a cornerstone of modern guides like The Simple Path to Wealth and I Will Teach You to Be Rich. Automation removes emotion from investing, eliminates decision fatigue, and ensures consistency across market cycles. Automated contributions turn investing into a habit rather than a choice, something that happens whether the market is euphoric or panicked. This habit leverages time, discipline, and compounding, creating an engine of wealth that runs 24/7 without requiring constant attention. The books emphasize that automation is the antidote to human inconsistency, making the investor's worst impulses irrelevant. A deeply powerful habit taught across wealth-building books is continuous learning, especially in subjects like investing, psychology, business, economics, and human behavior. Millionaires read constantly because reading compounds. Every book adds a new mental model, reduces ignorance, or enhances judgment. Over time, this habit builds a latticework of understanding that helps individuals navigate uncertainty, recognize opportunity, and avoid costly mistakes. Books teach that reading is not optional. It is a form of leverage. The habit of lifelong learning ensures that wealth grows not only in accounts, but in capability. Another essential habit is thinking long-term, a principle infused into works by Warren Buffett, Benjamin Graham, Charlie Munger, and countless other investing giants. Long-term thinking shifts focus from immediate gratification to future impact. It trains the mind to ignore temporary noise, endure volatility, and make decisions based on fundamentals rather than emotion. Long-term thinkers invest in assets that compound. They build careers that scale. They cultivate relationships that deepen. They develop skills that appreciate. This mental habit alone separates wealth builders from wealth chasers because time multiplies the choices of the patient and penalizes the decisions of the impulsive. Wealth-building books also teach the habit of managing risk intelligently. Risk is not the enemy. Mismanaged risk is. Books teach readers to protect the downside, diversify smartly, maintain liquidity, avoid high-interest debt, and build buffers for uncertainty. This habit transforms chaos into stability and fear into clarity. It teaches the investor that staying in the game is more important than swinging for the fences. Wealth is not built by avoiding all risk, but by taking the right risks with preparation and awareness. Another repeated lesson is the habit of creating and owning assets, whether through real estate, businesses, intellectual property, investments, or digital products. Books teach that wealth grows when assets work harder than their owner. The wealthy focus on building systems that produce cash flow, equity, or appreciation while they sleep. This habit shifts the reader from labor-based income to leverage-based income. Over time, asset ownership compounds into autonomy. The next habit emphasized in wealth literature is delayed gratification, the discipline to sacrifice short-term pleasures for long-term prosperity. This habit is not about restriction, it is about alignment. Books show that great fortunes are built by those who can resist social pressure, ignore trends, and commit to their own path even when results are not immediate. Delayed gratification is what makes investing possible, entrepreneurship sustainable, and frugality empowering rather than burdensome. A habit that often goes unnoticed but plays a critical role is environment design, the practice of shaping surroundings to support wealth-building behavior. James Clear emphasizes this in Atomic Habits, and wealth books indirectly reinforce it. Surround yourself with people who think long-term. Set up systems that make good choices easy, remove distractions that derail progress, and immerse yourself in communities where wealth building is normalized. Environment multiplies mindset. A well-designed environment turns discipline into default behavior. Another essential habit is review and iteration. Wealth builders routinely review their finances, track net worth, evaluate investments, and refine strategies. They treat wealth like a living system that must be monitored and optimized. This habit prevents stagnation, catches errors early, and reinforces intentional behavior. Books teach that wealth thrives on awareness and decays under neglect. Finally, the deepest habit found across wealth-building books is belief in agency, the conviction that one's financial future is not predetermined but created. This belief turns readers into actors rather than observers. It fuels resilience, persistence, and the willingness to adapt. It makes long-term goals feel attainable. Wealth begins with belief and expands with action. Together, these habits, awareness, discipline, automation, learning, long-term thinking, risk management, asset creation, delayed gratification, environment design, iteration, and agency form the behavioral architecture of financial freedom. Books teach them because they work. They have always worked. And readers who practice them consistently discover that wealth is not an event but the cumulative expression of the small, repeated decisions that compound over years into a life of autonomy, stability, and expanding opportunity, revealing that wealth is not a single breakthrough, but a lifestyle engineered through consistent adherence to principles that quietly outperform talent, luck, and external circumstance. In this second phase of the exploration, the narrative shifts from identifying the wealth-building habits found in books to understanding how these habits interact, reinforce one another, and transform an ordinary financial trajectory into an extraordinary one. Because habits do not exist in isolation, they operate as a system. And when that system is deliberately shaped, it becomes the invisible machinery that powers long-term success. The first insight into this system is the phenomenon of habit stacking, the process by which one good habit naturally strengthens another. Paying yourself first reinforces living below your means. Tracking spending reinforces intentional consumption. Continuous learning reinforces long-term thinking. Automated investing reinforces emotional discipline. Each habit is a gear, and when enough gears turn in synchrony, the entire wealth engine accelerates. Books teach these habits separately, but their true power emerges only when combined. A person who saves but does not invest stagnates. A person who invests but does not track spending bleeds progress. A person who learns but does not act remains stuck in potential. Wealth comes when habits merge into a cohesive ecosystem. The second layer of transformation involves habit replacement. Not merely adding new behaviors, but replacing harmful ones. Most people carry self-sabotaging money habits inherited from culture, family, or past experiences. Emotional spending, avoidance of financial discomfort, fear-based investing, impulsive decisions, and status-driven consumption. Wealth books train readers to identify these patterns and swap them for constructive alternatives. Fear is replaced with literacy. Impulse is replaced with automation. Status seeking is replaced with purpose-driven spending. Avoidance is replaced with review. This replacement is crucial because addition alone cannot overpower deeply rooted habits. Transformation occurs when old scripts are overwritten. The next dimension is identity-based habit formation, a concept popularized by Atomic Habits and deeply implicit in nearly every wealth-building book. Long-term financial behavior sticks only when rooted in identity. A person who tells themselves, "I'm bad with money," will unconsciously act in ways that confirm the belief. But someone who embraces the identity of a disciplined investor, a responsible steward, or a builder of assets naturally gravitates toward behaviors aligned with that identity. Books shape identity by exposing readers to narratives of people who started with little, built discipline, and transformed their finances through small, consistent actions. Identity becomes the stabilizing force that sustains habits when motivation fades. Another essential pattern is habit automation at scale. When habits like saving, investing, and debt repayment are automated, the investor bypasses the emotional volatility that derails most people. Automation turns discipline into a default state. It eliminates the need for willpower, which is inherently unreliable. Every automated transfer is a vote for the future self over the present self. Over years, automation becomes the quiet architect of wealth, ensuring that progress continues uninterrupted through market cycles, career changes, or personal challenges. A profound shift occurs when readers embrace the habit of long-term iteration. Wealth is not built through static plans, but through dynamic refinement. Life changes, income rises, expenses fluctuate, goals evolve, risks shift, and financial habits must adapt. Wealth builders perform regular reviews, adjusting investments, rebalancing portfolios, recalculating savings rates, updating goals, exploring new opportunities, and studying new knowledge. This creates a feedback loop. Each iteration improves the system. Each improvement compounds the result. Books normalize iteration by showing that even the greatest investors treat wealth as a lifelong learning process. Another transformative element is environmental alignment, the practice of structuring surroundings to support, not sabotage, wealth-building habits. This means surrounding oneself with people who value growth. It means designing digital environments free of financial noise. It means organizing physical spaces to encourage productivity and clarity. It means limiting exposure to temptation-driven advertising or social comparison. Over time, the environment amplifies discipline, turning good habits into effortless habits. Books often highlight the environments of wealthy individuals, their routines, circles, mindsets, and boundaries. These examples guide readers to shape their own contexts deliberately. The next insight is the power of habit compounding, the behavioral counterpart to financial compounding. Just as money grows exponentially when reinvested, habits grow exponentially when repeated. A 1% behavioral improvement each day becomes a radically different life over years. Tracking spending daily becomes financial clarity. Reading consistently becomes strategic literacy. Investing monthly becomes long-term wealth. Compounding turns small actions into life-changing outcomes. Books serve as reminders that the mundane, repeated habit holds more transformative power than sporadic bursts of effort. As habits deepen, the reader begins experiencing cognitive compounding, where each financial decision becomes easier, clearer, and more aligned with long-term goals. Emotional reactions to money diminish. Risk becomes measurable rather than frightening. Opportunities become recognizable rather than invisible. The brain adapts to wealth-building behavior and begins operating with increased sophistication. Decisions that once felt overwhelming become intuitive. This is the inflection point where the reader transitions from financial novice to financial strategist. Another advanced insight is the emergence of habitual opportunity seeking. Wealth builders cultivate the habit of scanning for value, undervalued assets, inefficiencies, business ideas, skills worth acquiring, mentors worth learning from. Reading fuels this habit by exposing the mind to diverse models of success. Each book adds a new lens. Each lens reveals opportunities that once hid in plain sight. Over time, the reader becomes someone who sees what others overlook. Ultimately, the deepest transformation is the development of habitual self-belief. Wealth books repeatedly emphasize that financial success is not reserved for the gifted, but for the consistent. As readers practice the habits tracking, saving, learning, investing, iterating, they build evidence that they are capable of mastering money. This evidence accumulates into confidence. Confidence becomes conviction. Conviction becomes identity. And identity becomes destiny. In the end, the wealth-building habits taught in books do not merely improve finances. They reshape the architecture of a person's daily life. They create order where there was chaos, clarity where there was confusion, discipline where there was inconsistency, and possibility where there was limitation. Through habits, wealth stops being an abstract aspiration and becomes an inevitable outcome of who the individual has become. And through this transformation, the reader discovers that the real secret hidden in every wealth book is not a strategy, but a structure, a set of habits that, once embedded, make financial freedom a natural extension of a life intentionally designed and steadily built through the power of consistent compounding action. Completed.